Hello, friend. Thanks for joining me. I've been working my way through the Discourses of Epictetus, and I'm up to book 2 of chapter 1. I have chatted all the chapters in book 1 previously, and I'll link to that playlist down in the details below. But now I'm up to book 2 of chapter 1, which is titled That There Is No Conflict Between Confidence and Caution. So confidence and caution. It seems like a paradox, really, that, because we don't think that we can be both confident and cautious at the same time. But this discourse explores how we not only can, but actually should cultivate this skill in order to lead a good life. So confidence and caution. So only those things that are in our control are actually really good or evil. Those things that are outside of our control are really neither. So the example that I use here is wealth versus greed. So wealth in and of itself is neither good or evil in the view of Epictetus, but greed, on the other hand, is an evil. So that's an example of evil being those things that are within our control, and those things that are not in our control are neither good or evil, if that makes sense. So we should learn to approach those things that are evil, good or evil, with caution, so that we can then approach those things that are not in our control with confidence. And so that is an example of exercising both caution and confidence at the same time. So again, example of wealth and poverty. Wealth is something that many would consider to be a good, but actually is usually not within our control. Wealth is something that can very easily slip through our fingers. Epictetus, though, says typically we, behave like an animal caught in a trap. An animal that's being hunted by hunters, they'll go out and they'll make noise to maybe cause the animal to, out of fear, react and then run straight into a net. And Epictetus uses this example for what we often do out of fear of something happening. So in the case of wealth, poverty, out of the fear of poverty, we then react out of fear, and then we end up doing evil. So we get it backwards. We end up practicing caution towards those things that are outside our control, and confidence to those things that are in our control, with those things that are within our control. And it should actually be the other way around. We should be approaching those things outside of our control with confidence, and those things within our control with caution. So Epictetus then uses the example of death, and there's a quote here that I think is pretty interesting. It says, "We ought then to turn our confidence towards death, and our caution towards fear of death." So this is a question that occupies the Stoics quite a bit, is life. Part of having a good life is understanding how to have a good death, since everybody ultimately dies. And so he's saying here we ought to turn our confidence towards death. Death is not something outside of our control, so we should behave towards death with confidence. Yes, we will die at some point, so we should be confident of that fact. And so how we react to that, the fear of death or the lack thereof, is what we should approach with caution, because that would lead us to then perhaps behave in ways that would prohibit us from living as good a life as we otherwise could. So how do we acquire this skill to use caution and confidence in this way? Epictetus says, a child is afraid of, he calls them bogeys, so like the bogeyman, scared of these sort of unforeseen things that they don't know. And how do they overcome that? Is through knowledge and experience. And so this is the way then for us to practice confidence and caution in our own lives, is just in our daily lives, recognizing those things over which we have no control, and approaching those with confidence, and understanding what we do have control over, and approaching those with caution. And discerning which is which requires actually a skill, but it can be learned with practice. The discourse then shifts into a discussion really of slavery and freedom, as Epictetus had been a slave, so he uses this metaphor quite a bit. And there's a quote here that says, "What else is freedom but power to pass our life as we will?" He has used an example here of a slave being freed quote unquote, meaning freed from being enslaved, but yet could still have some forms of slavery, in the sense that he's not free until he's freed his inner self, until he's freed his mind and his sort of internal sense of self. The quote goes on to say, well, no man who suffers fear or pain or distress of mind is free. But whoever is quit of fears and pains and distresses is by the selfsame road quit of slavery. So yeah, that's sort of what I was explaining there. I just think that quote is so cool. Then there follows this discussion on education and the sense of accumulating knowledge versus sort of putting it into practice. And Epictetus talks here about if you're just learning book knowledge, that's not really impacting your life. You need to put it into practice. These require life skills, right? It requires practice and effort on your part in order to implement these ideas into practice. And there is a quote here at the end of the discourse that says, and if you do this, that paradox will no longer seem impossible or paradoxical, that we must show caution and confidence at the same time. Confidence in regard to things beyond the will, caution in things which depend on the will. So yeah, I think that's a cool quote, and appropriate to end the chat with, that yes, we can be both confident and cautious at the same time, and in fact we should on a daily basis be cultivating this skill. All right, I will leave this chapter chat with that, and next time, Book 2, Chapter 2 is called On Peace of Mind, so we will see what Epictetus has to say about that coming up very soon. Until next time, take care.